Hello, welcome everyone to our episode with Gaurav Sundararaman. He is working in the cricket analytics area of ESPNCricinfo. He's worked with multiple T20 franchises and a couple of the national teams. Gaurav, thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
No worries. Well, look, I guess as always, we'll get started off with you. So can you tell us a bit more about your background?
Yeah, so like most Indians, I'm also very passionate about sports and cricket especially. I've been following cricket for the last 20 years or so, and I've been highly influenced by my brother, who's about 6 years elder to me, who's watched a lot of cricket. So we used to play a lot of cricket at home, and we used to watch every single match possible. So we were fortunate enough to have cable at a very early stage, and we ensured that we didn't miss too many matches. And yeah, so I've just been watching that, but my education has been like a typical South Indian who did engineering and then worked for 2-3 years and then did an MBA. Sports was always my passion, and I did want to work in sports, but never got the opportunity. Sent a few emails to Cricinfo in 2007, then 2011. Didn't get any response, and I just continued working in the usual corporate space before I got an opportunity to work in sports in a very freakish manner. I was in Chennai, based in Chennai, and there was this company called Sportmechanics, again based out of Chennai, who just got funding from Sachin and Sehwag, and that came in the Economic Times. And I was very surprised that, a company so close to my house actually does cricket analytics, and I didn't even know about it. And then I did some research, and thanks to the great world of Facebook, I was able to find a mutual friend to the CEO, and then I wrote to him. He called me over, and the simple question was, he did identify that I had a lot of passion, but it was just about whether I was able to take that huge pay cut, which a lot of people don't. So almost had to take a 200% pay cut to take up this job. And I thought, okay, being in Chennai, the fact that I was close to home and I didn't want to miss out on these opportunities. I finished my MBA, so I always had a backup option to go back to the corporate world if I want to. So I was at the right place, right time, and I took a plunge, and there was no looking back after that. I just enjoyed working in this space for the last, now it's going to be 7 years, and it's been an amazing journey. And I think having started working in cricket analytics, I don't think I can work anywhere else.
Right, awesome. Look, obviously your career took a turn, as you mentioned, in around 2012, working with Sportmechanics. What opportunities were you exposed to in your time over there?
So again, the company was also looking to grow, and till 2011 and 12, they were mainly focused on videos. So they used to capture every single match, showcase the videos to their teams, and their biggest client was the Indian cricket team and the big IPL franchises in MI and CSK. So they had a good clientele, but they had only video analytics, and that was the time they were looking to foray into data, and they realized the importance of data as well. So they asked me if I would like to lead that data team, considering I have an MBA, I have an experience of 3-4 years in corporate world. So, and the fact that I was interested in cricket, they wanted me to lead that team and try to manage their data. So little did I know that the data was not very structured, and there were a lot of challenges in analyzing them. And it was a great opportunity for both the company and for me. It was a mutually beneficial situation where I could come in and start using my knowledge and trying to see how we can manage their data and also interpret them. So nobody was there, and I did that. I did the reports for all the teams, and obviously while you're working on the job is the best way in which your knowledge can be showcased. So a lot of my knowledge was showcased during making those presentations, identifying those insights, and giving it to the players, and they found it very useful even for the team. So a lot of decisions were taken based on our insights, and it was fairly successful. So within the company, I got a good name and a good reputation, and then I was managing more and more people. We had more and more teams. So the growth happened more, I would say, not financially, but definitely in terms of exposure, in terms of roles. I had some amazing work experience. So the kind of clients they had were all top notch. I got a chance to work with ICC. I got a chance to work with the Indian cricket team, the top
Wow.
IPL clients, different franchises. So I think if you just hang in there and you go through the tough times, you leave money aside and try to manage with what you have, uh, it will come. That's what I learned. So yes, like I told you, I was lucky because I was in Chennai, so I didn't need. I lived at my house. I had a family was very supportive. My wife was working, so a lot of things fell in place. So for me to take this risk and to actually prolong this risk a little more. So that's something I always tell a lot of youngsters. Some people are lucky, some people are not. So I didn't have any financial loans as well. So
Yeah.
a lot of things fell in place.
Nice. Okay. And how did the role with ESPN Cricinfo come about after that?
So there's an interesting story to that. So obviously things were going very well in sports mechanics. I was working for 4 years there. I got a chance to help the West Indies team win the World Cup in
Wow.
T20 World Cup in India. I was their consultant that time. So everything was going pretty well. And I just thought, okay, I wanted to change because I've been working with teams for a long time, and not many people actually knew that I was doing a lot of work at the back end. The role of analyst is such that unless you're in the front end, you didn't get too much credit. People at the back end usually do the hard yards, but I felt that the job was not very, it was not giving me growth professionally in terms of people knowing the kind of work I've done. I was not getting enough exposure to in terms of the sporting industry. So I thought, okay, let's see how it is to work with media, and I applied to ESPN for the umpteenth time. And they obviously said that we'll get back to you and we'll let you know if there is some opening. Because I never had like a journalism background as such.
Yeah.
So I never wanted to be a writer or reporter, but I wanted to be more in the content space. So uh, I wrote to them, nothing happened. And then they had a quiz competition called Crick IQ, which they've been running for a long time. And I so happened to take part, and I finished third in that. And the CEO, Mr. Sambit obviously was the chief guest, and he saw me there again, and he said that I have you in my mind, and I'll let you know whenever an opportunity comes up. And then it just so happened that an opportunity came 2-3 months down the line, and he called me, and my background was slightly niche to Cricinfo as well. Because he and I knew prepare for game. That was something which I think they found interesting, because most of their guys are people with journalistic background. So again, that helped me get a job with Cricinfo, because I already had sporting background, and my niche was T20 cricket. So I had focused a lot on T20 cricket because I knew that that is how the future is heading. So how the teams work, and in fact, there's so much tactics involved in T20. I kind of focused on that, and I wanted Cricinfo to also change the way they come it like Test cricket and ODI cricket maybe before I joined. So and they also were on board. Here I am in the stats team doing content for them.
Okay, so look, what have been some of the most interesting aspects of your role in the last 3 or 4 years?
I think fundamentally it's the fact that dealing with a lot of high-profile clients, high-profile players, that is something which you learn on the job. Again, ability to communicate the insights to them. That is something which is not something which can be taught. You deal with a lot of numbers, you deal with a lot of insights, but to pick out the right insight for the coach, for the player, and something which they can understand and actually use it in the game is something which I've learned. And I think that is very important for everybody, because each person has their own knowledge, and each person has their own way to actually interpret data, but actually making sense to what that team wants, understanding the requirements, and giving solutions is what I've learned. So for example, if you say we found at one point in time Chris Gayle was very weak against a short ball,
Yeah.
and that too for bowlers bowling about 140 clicks, he found it very hard. Now there are people who just use that as an insight and communicate it to the respective teams saying that you do that. But there was a team which didn't have a bowler who bowls at 140. So if you have just a guy like Bhuvneshwar Kumar who bowls at 130 coming in and bowling a short ball, maybe he will get hit. So these are small ways by which I've learned on the job, that you need to customize your insights based on the team you have. And yes, the data might tell you a story, but it doesn't mean that it will directly go work out. So if you don't communicate that to them, you're giving a wrong plan effectively.
Right, nice. And what do you think are a couple of the main growth areas in the next few years of cricket?
I think fielding is very underrated, and there's not much of metrics to actually measure fielding. It's hard. It's not easy as well. We also tried doing a lot of things, but the problem is most of the data is collected off TV, and they hardly show the entire field at every single point in time, and we don't know what happens to the fielders who are not following the ball. So ideally, unless ICC introduces has an official data collector, introduces cameras to like how the NBA does, I don't think we are reaching that level. But I would like to see fielding being given more importance, and a lot of data being collected. The other focus area, another growth area, is the education to the players and people involved in cricket about the value of analytics. Today, yes, it's mainly run by the coach and the analyst, and the coach communicates it to the player. But I think data plays a big role at various levels across formats. So Test cricket, it can be used to improve technique. Test cricket, it can be used to in strategies as well, but more for player development. Whereas T20 and ODIs, I think data plays a big role in strategies and tactics, and helping teams actually make a decision. So, but we still have a lot of players who don't prefer data, who are slightly old school. So I think it's just a matter of time before everybody gets educated and everybody gets on board and becomes something very normal.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And look, the IPL, it's taken Indian and also world cricket by storm over the last decade or so. How has data and analytics in the IPL and other T20 competitions evolved over that time?
I think it's huge. I think it plays a big role, and the IPL's even kind of, I'm very grateful to that, because that's kind of given my job and my profession. The fact that a lot of people don't know that T20 cricket has so much tactics, and IPL is a pioneer with respect to this. There's so much of what do I say, data being used, and it varies across a lot of teams. So I think it's very team dependent, captain dependent, coach dependent, and a lot of it depends on the setup you have. A team like CSK may not need that kind of data analytics because you have a captain who's as good as the numbers, who's able to read the game better than anybody else. A team like Mumbai Indians uses data a lot. A guy like Rohit Sharma is very keen on insights, data, and they do meticulous planning, and it helps them perform and do well. So you had two very successful teams at two ends of the spectrum. So that's what I tell most people, that it's not like if you use data you're going to win. It might give you an edge, it might not. But maybe if CSK change their captain, they might need some use of data as well. So I think a combination of both cricketing instincts and the insights we give matters a lot. So IPL has grown in tremendous areas, especially in terms of data. I think a couple of years back, RCB went completely in a data route. They hired coaches and support staff who are totally into data, and tried to follow as much of strategies using data, and it didn't work out for them for some reason. So I think the captain, coach, and ability to make those decisions using data, knowing when to make and where to make, matters a lot, and that's where the captains come into the picture. So I would say maybe in the IPL everybody uses it, but the degree of usage varies, and the teams which use them, I've seen them being more consistent.
Right. And what about globally? You know, you mentioned you've worked with the Windies when they won their T20 World Championship earlier. what about the global scale? Because obviously it's much talked about that money in terms of the cricketing governing bodies in different countries is quite unequal. Who are some of the countries that I guess are using a lot of data analytics, and who might we might be looking at that in the future and aren't currently doing so?
Data analytics also, if you can actually segmentize it, you have
Yeah.
your video, you have your data, and you have your wearable technologies, you have your body area networks where you start measuring a lot of things using sensors on the field, on the body, and then do analytics on that and make decisions. So slowly people have started using wearables as well. Australia are usually far ahead than most other countries
Yeah.
in terms of using as much of their resources as possible. Australia and England, I would say, are slightly ahead. South Africa, not too far behind. And India, right up there in terms of leveraging all technologies. India still needs to understand the value, but they're getting there. Whereas the teams like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and even the West Indies, for that matter, they haven't invested a lot in this space.
Right.
But it's not like they don't use it nowadays. Having an analyst has become kind of mandatory, but the extent of usage and the kind of infrastructure they have to put up at the grassroots level up to the national team is missing. And I think that way only Australia and England are far superior. So every single county match in England is now available to the selector. England selector Ed Smith is a big fan of data, and the way they select teams, the way they use data to actually make those decisions are pretty interesting to note. So I think all teams need to get there. My wish is that every team needs to have this information. Whether they use it or not is secondary. But right now, there's no structure for that. Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are way behind the other teams. So today, even for selection, imagine if I have all the data about everybody's workload, how fit people are. And I'm just not talking about the elite cricketers. I'm talking about the 150, 200, 300 odd cricketers who are trying to get into that national team, right? So if everybody has access to these facilities and everybody has access to the information, the decision makers, I think we're improving a lot. And it has to come from top down. It has to come from the board. Every board should allocate some budget and invest the right people. Automatically, the industry will grow. It will give more employment opportunities, and you will find a completely new industry and new ecosystem.
Right. Awesome. And look, obviously, you're in the industry at the moment working with ESPNCricinfo. For people that aren't fortunate enough to be in the industry already, obviously they're going to be hampered by the amount of data points that are available and sort of freely, publicly available. How would you summarize the difference in what's available out there? So, there's companies like ESPN or CricViz, obviously, that have the top tier in terms of what's available. And then there's freely available data. There's obviously a big difference, but how would you summarize sort of the levels in the industry?
A great question. So as I was growing up and trying to be in this space, ESPNCricinfo was the only place where we could go for data. Now there are a lot of people who kind of scrape data, write codes, and take data from the public domain and they try to create their own database. Yes, for the person who is trying to be an analyst, is a very common question asked. It's not easy to get granular data. Even CricViz, they don't have their data open to public. At least Cricinfo has Stats Guru, where you can do some amount of data mining. But the kind of data analysis you do with basic data is a lot less than what you can achieve with granular data. So which is why we have a lot of people. I know there's a company called Crick Sheets who kind of mine data from ESPNCricinfo's commentary and try to get ball by ball data. But there's also a few text analytics companies who mine data from commentary and try to see if they can do some work. But yes, data access to public is very limited and you can't really make major sense of it, which is why you need to join these companies. And I don't see it I don't see it also opening up too easily, because it's a lot of data which is valued and people sell this information. So they wouldn't want it to be in public domain. So whatever youngsters have to do, they'll have to do with public data, or they have to create their own mechanism to actually collect that information.
Right. Okay. So I guess what I was trying to just to clarify, there's those two levels. What's available to the top tier companies, what's freely available. Are there any companies that you're aware of that are trying to do something in the middle with video analysis or sort of machine learning and all those types of things?
See, this is a very small space. I'm talking mainly from the Indian ecosystem, and I also know that a lot of even Cricket Australia, for example, have hired only a company from Chennai to do their data analysis. So there only about 3-4 companies in this space who have data, say from 2008 to whatever we have today, to actually play around with machine learning, etc. You need a good sample amount of data and granular data to make sense. So I know for the fact that these companies obviously do work on this space in machine learning, do algorithms. ESPNCricinfo, in fact, did some work last year. We launched something called Smart Stats, which kind of measures the player impact in T20 cricket. So that was done using machine learning algorithms only. So basically, if you have that data, you have access to that, then you end up doing this. I don't see many companies starting now looking to collect data and then getting into machine learning. So one approach could be that they could be companies blooming who end up buying this information and then looking to start from the modeling part. So that I know for the fact might happen, but starting from scratch, no. So you do have these tier one companies, and then you have a lot of startups who are not technically into cricket analytics, but they are more into the content part.
Take the last few years, are you still hands-on technically? And if so, which tools or sort of modeling methodologies have you used mainly?
I'm more of a domain person, so I give the cricketing inputs. I give so assume we are working with a data scientist. My job is to provide the variables, make sure what makes sense, what variables to take, what not to take, because those things matter a lot in terms of how your results are. So, but the tools predominantly used are Tableau for data visualization, R and Python for just the algorithm part. And right now people use Excel only for as a database, but you do have SQL. The old school SQL is always there because most of the data usually resides there, so SQL queries help. So it's mainly these tools. And again, like I told you, a lot of data scientists are there who know R, Python, and Tableau. So these are essential skill sets which they all know, but maybe they lack in the domain space. So I think a combination of these two is important, and there are not many people with that skill set. And the interesting thing is, if you actually see the data science space, it's very highly paid and it's a highly skilled resource, and there are a lot of companies in other industries vying for that. So the resource you get there are very expensive, and when they come into sport, they don't want to work for such low cost and at a low salary. It's natural. So I've been finding it very hard to find a person who's really interested in cricket and who's willing to sacrifice money and who's very good in data science. So what we do is we tend to try to outsource or work with data science people, because in a way I think it works well. You don't need too many domain experts as well in cricket. Everybody's a domain expert, so the algorithm could go wrong as well. So it's a tricky balance which we need to get, and hopefully we get there.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's interesting. I laughed almost because as I said, I recruit within data science and analytics. And when you were talking about the pay jump of coming from banking or retail into sport, I can very much vouch for that. I can't imagine too many people interested, but I think it takes a select brave few like yourself a few years ago to make that leap to advance the industry long term.
That's the kind of mental mindset change you need, and I tell that to most students or most people who come to me for sporting advice about that mindset change. If you're willing to do that, then you're in for the long haul. And trust me, everybody seems to know cricket, right? But a lot of people kind of sometimes overestimate their knowledge, is something I've noticed. It takes a lot of I tell most of my students that you see, Malcolm Gladwell had a 10,000 hour theory about if you do a particular job for 10,000 hours, you become an expert. And I tell people I watched cricket for 10,000 hours easily over since 1992 when I started watching the game full time. So that's how you gain knowledge. You read a lot, you watch a lot, and then you kind of become a domain expert. It just doesn't come by playing cricket. A lot of people think if I play the game, I'm an expert. It doesn't work like that in cricket analytics.
I think I mentioned this to you before, but I've been reading Cricket 2.0. I'm almost done with that book and going through many interesting podcasts, including Jared Kimber and other people from Cricinfo as well. What are some of your favorite resources within that cricket analytics space that you recommend for people that are trying to build a career within the industry?
I think there are a lot of independent individual writers, content creators. I think a lot of them are on Twitter. Just if your listeners can just go to my Twitter handle and see the people I follow, there'll be a lot of cricket analytics professionals there. I think it's still not very structured in terms of companies. Obviously, CricViz is one, Cricinfo is one in terms of big corporates, but otherwise you have a lot of individual guys doing a lot of good work in cricket analytics space. There's not much books to actually recommend, to be honest, because nobody's really written anything in this space. And even if there are some papers available, but those really don't give a true picture of what the industry is like. It's good to just read that and maybe absorb it, and it could be there for your learning. But I don't think it's a resource which can be really used in terms of shaping up a person's career. So my advice would be to be an avid reader online, follow the right people on Twitter, read their blogs, read their work, engage in debates, engage in discussions, have a theory, try to prove that theory using numbers or using data, whatever you have, based on so many people writing different things. So that is very important. And then automatically you will also realize where you stand in terms of the cricket analytics ecosystem.
Awesome. Okay. And you recently posted on LinkedIn offering advice on how to build a career in sports analytics. It received, I think, something like 400 comments and 400 likes, 60 comments in just a couple of weeks. What were a couple of the most common types of questions, and what was your feedback?
A lot of people didn't want to post their questions in this comment, so I got more than 100 DMs in terms of questions, especially within the sporting space. So that is something which was something interesting to know. When you do a small analytics of your post, people are actually cagey to ask their questions in public. Anyway, one of the most common questions is about education. A lot of Indians want to know if it is important to go study sports or sports management or analytics abroad to actually get a job in India, and or to get a job abroad. And that's the most common question, and my answer is it's not important to get a degree abroad. And there are very, very, very few people who actually manage to get jobs abroad, having studied having invested a lot of money on courses abroad, not because of the knowledge or skill, because of the visa regulations and the fact that sports is still not a niche skill in Europe, where they need to take immigrants. They prefer locals to do that. So I've hardly found any Indian graduate who have gone there, done their sports undergrad or postgrad, and have actually got jobs there. Very few people I know. And I challenge, in fact, most people to send me profiles of those who have actually cracked a job. So, if you're financially okay and you have a lot of money to actually invest on education, then I would advise people to go abroad, study, gain the global exposure, and come back to India and work.
Right.
But otherwise, I don't think there are enough sports courses also in India which are at the equivalence of your IIMs and IITs in sports. I think we're getting there. There are 2-3 colleges who have started sports management courses, but it still does not attract the really high-profile candidates. So in terms of education, I don't think right now sports education is that important. But what is more important is learning on the job and trying to build a network and trying to get hold of real life practical experiences. And there are a lot of sports jobs which are in terms of are taken over by freelancers. I think that's a good way to start. Anyway, money is going to be less. You might as well do freelance, dabble with a lot of things in sports. Within sports, there's just so much of verticals, if I might call it. You have analytics, you have technology, you have event management. So it's important that students know what they want to do. And that was the second question which I got from most people. They're not clear of what they want. They just want to get into sports, but they have no idea what they want. So that is something I keep advising them to try to have more clarity in the role. Like if you want to be a journalist, then it's easy for me to mentor them. If you want to be into analytics, it's easier. There's a part to take. Just getting into sports is not doesn't make it easy, because there's so much to do in sports, and you do have the really big companies and you have a lot of small startups. So
Right.
how do you balance the two in your career is something I try to advise them. And those were the two major common questions: education and not knowing what to do in sports.
Right. Okay. Well, that's really insightful, because I think you had a good sample size from all the people that would have contacted you. But I think the last point you mentioned is quite interesting. So there's, just like any market, you're talking about, say, for example, the IPL, you're talking about the opportunities with companies like Cricinfo, for example. But if you look at the Indian market, I assume that's where you have the most knowledge. If you look at that market, obviously it seems like there's a lot of supply, in terms of the people looking for opportunities in this space. Obviously, India has a very heavy sort of technical background in terms of educational and workforce. But do you think there's demand within the market to sort of to have these opportunities, whether it's not right now, but do you think there'll be enough demand in 2 to 5 years for a lot of the people that are looking to come through?
Demand will come only if there's a complete change in structure. For example, the Philadelphia 76ers have a team of about 80 people working in their analyst team. And most NBA teams have about 30, 40 people as their backroom staff for helping teams mine data and actually make sense out of the data and help in decision making. So if every team has the 30, 40 people, then you're talking of opportunities. But in India, the problem is, see, you have just 8 IPL teams, and that work is mainly for 2 months a year. We don't have a league structure yet. For us, it's mainly the national team, and the national team is just one team. So if you're looking at elite cricketing opportunities, it's just 9 teams. Yeah. And then you have your Ranji Trophy teams, you have your local league teams, and that's not very glamorous. At the same time, it doesn't pay you as much as it has to. So this is the biggest challenge. So unless the structure changes where you have more cricket happening all through the year, or the IPL teams realize that to succeed in those 2 months, we need a team of 10, 15, which manage players, which do a lot of things, or they buy teams in other leagues across the world, like what KKR have done. Yeah. Then you have a sporting company within a franchise, which is the analytics team or with the technology team or any team in particular, then your demand will rise. Today, the amount of jobs are so less that you just have every team already has their analysts, and attrition is so low. It's very hard to quit these jobs unless there's something drastically that goes wrong. Either you're really bad or you desperately need of money. So otherwise, the same guys seem to be in the same roles for the last 7-8 years. I know people who have been in exactly the same job in 2012 who are still at the same job today. So how is that going to create a demand? It's not going to create a demand. So that was another reason why I also moved out, because I needed to create multiple, dabble with multiple opportunities to know exactly where the growth can lie and how you can grow. So if there is no high performance analytics manager for a franchise, if there's just one guy who acts as the manager and the analyst, so there's no growth, right? So he continues to be at the same position for 8 years. Maybe financially he might grow, but in terms of role-wise, you may not. So that kind of structure needs to be created. And I'm not only talking about cricket. Cricket is far more structured in the other sports. I see a lot of interest coming in football and basketball and athletics, etc. They are so poorly structured in India that once if all these sports have a structure and they realize the importance of data and video analytics, I'm sure demand will open up.
Excellent. All right. And look, I love asking this question. I think it's quite interesting. So, you've worked in cricket for almost a decade now, I believe. So, if you take all your experience, your technical skills, your domain expertise, and you had to choose one player or one team to work with on a problem, who would you choose, and what would the issue be that you would work with them on?
I think I would be very interested in working with CSK post Dhoni era.
Right.
I think that poses a big challenge, and the fact that you have a completely new leader and a huge legacy to carry forward. I think the usage of numbers and data and analytics in just creating that entire structure to make sure you're able to continue to succeed, I think will be a challenge for them. And I think analytics can play a big role in that. So that is something which is a challenge which I would always look forward to do.
Right, awesome. So I guess just on a personal level, who's your favorite IPL team? Is it Chennai or?
Yeah, it has to be, having been there and followed them from 2008 very closely, it has to be Chennai.
Nice. Okay. And look, we'll finish off on a personal one then. What was your favorite IPL memory of all time?
It has to be a knock scored by Suresh Raina once in 2014, although it was a losing cause against Kings 11 Punjab. I've never seen a player be in the zone and hit as well as he did that day. He scored about 87 from, I think, 27 or 25 balls. It was one of the great IPL knocks. Unfortunately, it ended up in a losing cause, but I've never seen a T20 knock till date where there was such clean hitting from ball one. So that still remains as one of my greatest IPL memories.
Fair enough. Excellent. Well, look, thank you so much, Gaurav, for coming on. It's been really insightful, and I'm sure to be really helpful for the people, some of which you would have spoken to on LinkedIn recently, but the other readers as well, the other viewers, to listen to what you had to say. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot for having me here, Nicole.
Excellent. No worries.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to check out more of our content, go to sporttechdaily.com or follow us on social media across Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram.